leader in his own right, not only in HR, but also in the business strategy, also as an organizational architect, and he has been at the forefront of Maruti Suzuki for a very, very long time. Very, very warm welcome to you, Siddiqui Saab. Thank you for being with us. Over to you now. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Very privileged to be part of this Nhrdn program after a long time. And I was just wondering, for an auto sector guy like me, happiness right now was October, where we did 200,000 retails in 1 month. Because if business performance is there, then we all are happy. 30,000 people in Maruti. I was just looking at this one perspective, what Prem said, synergizing the 3 critical variables, and we cannot run away from any one of them. We are looking at the talent strategy for future. We are looking at technology coming in, changing big way, and we are looking at people well-being, happiness factor, end of the day. And somewhere I think I heard that lady, she mentioned about this technology being a support, but end of the day, personal touch is going to matter. Somewhere perhaps when we look at Maruti at the board level, some such perspective, then perhaps most important to a great extent, I think this technology here is not working properly. So I just wanted to talk about how we are decoding this environment. And perhaps then we talk about rest of the 3 factors. 5 critical variables which at the board level we have identified, starting from globalization. And perhaps to a great extent, we are looking at this huge impact of the digital wave, which every kind of work processes in a company are going to get impacted. Product, services are going to be getting impacted. Human resources will get impacted. We are looking at big way, this shift on erstwhile learning and development. That will perhaps to the new business order will have to be aligned. Maybe to a great extent, reskilling will come into play. De-learning will come into play, which we have never experienced in the past 20, 30 years. And we are also looking at adapting to this diversity, because diversity of many types we are looking at. Gender diversity, we are looking at region, we are looking at geography, we are looking at global, any colleagues coming in, we are looking at sexual differences, we are looking at disabilities. All this will be a big challenge moving forward. Last but not the least, the turbulence. When we are looking at the business environment, we are looking at this volatility. We are looking at this very fast pace of change, government regulations, and therefore, game is going to be turbulent all the way. One more perspective from the human resource angle. There are 3 kind of big shifts, which whether you like it or you don't like it, we are going to experience. First will be the change of nature of work we will be experiencing, and we look at decoding the future. And we are looking at change of workplace also. Various variables are going to impact the change of workplace. And third, the change of workforce also. We are only talking about multi-generations working together. In Maruti's case, almost 5 generations of workforce are working together. All 5 are totally different in their aspirations, expectations. But we are also now experiencing the gig workforce. We have been in HR quite, I'll say habitual of offering appointment offers to people for 40 years. When the gig workforce comes into play, they may like to come and work for you for a project for 4 or 5 months and then off. They may not be interested in your 40 years of appointment letter. So employment terms and contracts are going to change big way. And therefore, perhaps very big need for us to maybe revisit, refresh and recreate how you are going to define the people strategy for future. When we are looking at this digital transformation, what we call the digital wave, we are also looking at the potential of speed, reach, transparency. But at the same time, we are also having this big fear of losing the personal touch, where perhaps machines will dominate. And somewhere perhaps when we see this recent experience of AI being used in hiring people, the results are somewhere so-so. They are not that accurate what we thought initially, that AI will help us to hire people. And somewhere this big shift is going to be a big challenge for human resources. We are perhaps also looking at how to manage this kind of transition. Most companies, in my thinking, have been looking at a generic way, one-size-fits-all kind of an approach on digital. But in Maruti, perhaps we have decided that we will be doing our own customization, and we'll go step by step of what fits well into our culture, our sector, our products and services, and our people. Not blindly going for any blanket cover of digital being used by Maruti. Perhaps when we look at, in the light of these three perspectives which I shared, when we look at the business environment, when we look at these three critical factors of change in the workforce, nature of work, and the workplace, we are looking at this big shift of digital transformation. What should be the impact on the new age HR capabilities? And in my thinking, first basic thing which will be coming up is the basic business understanding. To a great extent, one area where we need to develop more as CFOs, CMOs, and plant heads. HR heads should also develop into that kind of space with greater reach and understanding of the business. And I'll just give you one simple example. In our case, the foreign exchange fluctuations, when we look at rupee to yen, today 1 rupee is equal to about 1.5623 yen. And in this decimal points, if the yen gets stronger by 1 decimal point, we stand to lose 21 crores, that moment itself. And if it weakens 1 decimal point, we stand to gain 21 crores. In the kind of transaction of 40,000 crores of buying, this is the kind of reflection of one business variable which I am talking to you. Similarly, perhaps we have been looking at, in case of Maruti, maybe a kind of a cost down which is more scientific, which is more looking at our work. So in one car, roughly 5,000 components go into making the car. So we decided that we should look at reducing the weight of 1 gram per component, per part, to save 1 yen or 1 rupee. If that happens in our case, what is your guess that what will be the kind of annual saving for Maruti? Any wild guess? 1 gram weight reduction to save 1 yen or 1 rupee, 5,000 parts in one car. What do you think will be the kind of cost saving in our case per year? So for 18 lakh cars which we did last year, 18.52 to be precise, it will be hovering around 900 crores every year. So somewhere perhaps that kind of business understanding, in my thinking, will be one very critical thing. Shift from purely operational HR cobweb to a balance of strategic and operational HR will be one second shift which I think we will be looking at. We are looking at this adopting of HR technology, bringing in speed, responsiveness, transparency. Maybe we are looking at, to a great extent, this capability to look at transformational leaders' role, bringing in consistent change targeted over next 5, 7, 10 years. And we are looking at, to a great extent, maybe a kind of focus on aligning business focus with sensitivity to people aspirations. Maruti is a great example in that sense that many people ask that while you people are doing 50% market share, the balance 20 competitors are sharing the balance 50%. Next highest to Maruti is Hyundai with 16-17% market share. What is the secret of success? And I thought that perhaps based on this Hrm Summit, will you like to try some answer why this consistent 36 years of leadership in auto industry for Maruti? What can be the key success factors there? Different from the 20 other competitors. Great companies, Toyota being there, Ford, General Motors, Mahindra, Tata Motors, Hyundai, you name it and everybody is there in the field, all global manufacturers. What can be a differentiator for this sustained success of Maruti? So one is top leadership ethos, the capability to strategize, to have this vision quotient, to really have this walk the talk. That is the most critical factor which has been consistent over the next, maybe last 36 years and over the next few years going to define this success, this leadership. Second is the work culture, very unique work culture, more oriented towards the Japanese management style work practices, more human, respect and dignity for people. That is the work culture I am talking. Highest ownership, motivation, and element of pride for 30,000 people to be associated with Maruti. No downsizing, no such concept of a negative kind of human resource perspective in Maruti, whatever may happen. Is a kind of different ethos of top leadership, work culture. To a great extent, these two are the kind of great differentiators. Then, perhaps when we look at people ownership, people capability, people commitment, a combination of commitment and capability is where the performance comes in. Obviously, first top three factors are not alone responsible for our success. Product capability, the kind of designs, and the network reach. 5 key factors which define this success. But the last two, the product features, product capability, product technology, and when we look at network, can be copied by all 20 competitors. What cannot be copied is top leadership ethos. What cannot be copied is the work culture. What cannot be copied wherever the human touch aspect is involved is the people capability and people commitment. Somewhere perhaps when we look at this kind of shift, then perhaps what I see as HR next, where the business focus is there, some key perspectives which are going to really define maybe the kind of focus which we need to have on workplace options which we have been habitual. We'll have to add more alternatives to those workplace options. That flexibility will be required for bringing in people who can work with great enthusiasm, maybe great energy, great passion, great ownership. We are also looking at capability building with e-modules, e-games, maybe at the kind of flexibility and convenience of people who are going to receive that kind of capability building focus. We are also going to look at maybe to a great extent a new employment contract perspective. Somebody wants to work with you for 6 months, we should be open to have that kind of gig worker coming in and working with us. Somebody wants to work with us only for 2 years, we should be open to that, rather than expecting everybody to join Maruti to work for next 40 years. Somewhere we are also looking at, to a great extent, less focus on hierarchy and designations, more team-based organization structures. And maybe in our case, when we look at some such perspective in case of Maruti, then mostly the focus is driven by teams, which are comprising of people from different kind of functional identities. But actually the responsibility is for the CFT, cross-functional team, to derive the entire perspective. Maybe we are also looking at, to a great extent, looking at our dealers and our supplier companies, where we bring them into this bigger understanding of human resource strategy for Maruti in future. Because if they can't grow with us, then perhaps we'll be facing problems, because Maruti is just like an aeroplane. On one side, the wing is suppliers. On one side, the wing is dealers. Entire body, middle, is what Maruti is. If we have to take off, then we have to take off building capabilities across our supply chain, on the dealer side, on the supplier side. Maybe when we look at technology in Maruti, 2008 onwards, we are looking at HR analytics and forecasting. Somewhere 2010, we had this forecast that top management, leadership, about 15 people, 46% of them will retire in 2018. So we had 8 years to prepare for that succession. That is the power of HR forecasting and analytics, which we use in Maruti. To some extent, that technological impact is coming into play. We are also looking at maybe employee well-being to a great extent. What should be the HR focus there? And somewhere we are looking at maybe a complement of top leadership role, the work culture. We are looking at perhaps the health perspective when people are at work. In our case, medical is on actuals. There is no limit. That's the concept of well-being in Maruti when we talk of our people. And recently when we looked at the board contribution, we looked at creating a welfare fund by Maruti from our profits, 1% of the net profit, almost about 100 crores, to be contributed for 3 years to create this welfare fund of our own. And this fund will take care of post-retirement medical and kind of superannuation needs of our people. It's perhaps the first company in the private sector to look at that space. When we look at this well-being, and we looked at this occurrence of 40-year-old guys getting into heart issues, then our policy of medical examination every year, which is more a Japanese practice, more a kind of public sector practice also, but we introduced that for 30 years old also, this system should start. That kind of care within the company will be made for people well-being. When perhaps we are looking at happiness quotient for our people, then we are looking at aspirations for learning. We are looking at aspirations for dignity of self-respect of a person, shop floor worker, blue collar, or a top guy, vice president, same concept, dignity of respect. And therefore, freedom for expression, empowerment, ownership is somewhere happiness is related when we look at the corporate perspective. And to a great extent, all this put together is where we think we are combining the impact, synergizing the troika of maybe talent, technology, and we are looking at great retention, great people well-being, great element of pride. Somewhere, maybe in the next 10 years, 12 years, some key principles which will help corporates to look at, especially human resources. First perspective is understanding of business, as I said. Second perspective is staying relevant rather than being outdated, rather than becoming absolutely irrelevant. That's a big danger in human resources. Policies which I have seen have shelf life of 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. I think policies in human resources will have a shelf life of 2 years, maximum. Then you'll have to review, restructure, and maybe revisit. When we look at the third capability, staying relevant, business understanding, third capability is selectively deleting the past. The big problem with all of us is that we hang on to the past and we would like to be so rigid and so unconscious that we lose all the touch. Selectively deleting the past is where you create the maximum space. In Japan, there is a very famous story of some Japanese wise people being consulted by CEOs and big shots of corporate sector. So one such CEO was trying to get in touch with one Japanese Zen master. Sir, I want to meet you. Sir, I want to meet you. Japanese Zen master was not replying to his request. 5 months, 6 months, 7 months. Then email, phone, then he approached through a friend, and finally that wise Japanese Zen master invited the CEO to his house. So in Japan, they don't have this kind of furniture. They sit on the carpet with a very small, low table in between to serve Japanese tea and all that. That side, the CEO was sitting. This side, the Japanese Zen master was sitting. He brought one kettle of tea, 2 cups. And in the cup of the CEO started pouring this tea. So from the cup, the tea started going, overflowing to the saucer to the carpet. And the CEO got totally taken aback. Sir, what are you doing? He says, you have come to me just like this overflowing cup with all the muck here in your head. Therefore, I did not want to meet you. First, you must go back and create some space here. Selectively delete your past. Then come back to me. Then what I talk to you will make sense. This is very true in our corporate sector. Day in and day out, I have seen leaders fixated, rigid, staying where they were 20, 30 years back. We are talking of the leadership styles, 6 styles, situational leadership theory and whatnot, capability to shift, move, slip up and down, depending on the situation, depending on the people, adopt that leadership style. Sorry, it doesn't happen that way. This is one big thing which we'll have to look at, selectively deleting the past. Last but not the least, developing a leadership quotient, in my thinking, which becomes very, very critical, which has the 3 capabilities: vision quotient of leadership, business quotient of leadership, strategy, able to look at the future much earlier than people realize now, and third is the emotional quotient. We all have unconsciously very strong business quotient, but unfortunately very weak vision quotient and emotional quotient. When I look at emotional quotient, basically I am talking of simplicity, modesty, builder and groomer of people, great listener, listening leadership, capability to appreciate people. That is the route to take this happiness kind of culture into actual execution into your company. On the work culture in Maruti, we are very sensitive and very conscious to bring this synergization of the leadership ethos and the work culture. Then actually it reaches out to people. Many companies I have seen, there is a stated work culture and there is an actual work culture, and there is a big difference between the two. Big problem, recipe for disaster. Somewhere leadership, we talk something else, but we walk something else. Big problem there. Somewhere in Maruti, this kind of effort from human resources over the last 15, 16 years of bringing in this modesty, this simplicity, this reach to people, this walk the talk, this discipline, and maybe this great capability of listening. Listening can be by processes of maybe a kind of tea group meeting, maybe a kind of stay interview, opposite of exit interview. You take exit interview of people who are leaving. We take stay interview of people who are working with us. We take their views into consideration, give value to them, what they are suggesting. Coffee with HR if they have a problem. Somewhere, some such listening leadership keep our feet on the ground, and we are able to bring in that culture which drives our performance. So now I have another maybe 5, 7 minutes, 10 minutes for any questions you may have on this perspective which I just shared with you. Looking tired? I think if we are also running short of time, if you have no questions, maybe we can meet during the break hours. Please, please.
Maruti is a big manufacturing industry.
Myself, Mahanti from SR. Maruti is a big manufacturing industry. How you manage the contract labor in case of, so far the statutory compliances is concerned, being Maruti is the principal employer? Do you feel that contract labor is the partner of the business, or they are the liability for the organization?
You know, in our case, 2001 onwards, when this shift happened, we have looked at a combination of temporary workers on the rolls of Maruti. We have looked at contract workers, and we have looked at apprentices, and we have looked at student trainees, all being part of Maruti's business framework. And somewhere they are all linked to get opportunities for regular employment within Maruti based on their performance. So this model has worked last 18 years very well. And somewhere one basic fact which is when we look at people well-being is, I think normally I have seen corporates hovering around minimum wages for contract workers or temporary workers. In our case, we pay 60% above the defined minimum wages. So that has been one differential. But when we look at their participation into Maruti's Kaizen scheme or different other welfare initiatives, they are very much being considered part of the family itself. And to a great extent, perhaps when we look at this Japanese perspective in our case, then one curiosity which comes to my mind is that most of you people may be aware about how Japanese companies work. What is the key difference between Japanese and Indians, in your understanding? How Japanese are different than Indians?
Focus on quality.
Focus on quality, you are absolutely right.
Doers rather than talkers.
Pardon?
Doers rather than talkers.
Yeah, doers rather than talkers. Very, very correct, yes.
Meticulous planning.
Meticulous planning, one big difference.
Maintaining timelines.
Timelines, family connect, respect for human beings,
Collaborative working.
collaborative working,
They are more quality concerned.
quality concern. One very big difference you are missing. If you just think a little sideways.
Respect for people.
Respect for people,
They're very driven by honor.
driven by honor, great character. One big difference which I am indicating after working 10 years with Toyota, now 16 years with Suzuki is, we are emotional bumps, they are emotionally very cool. No emotional impact on their working at all. One of my colleagues, joint managing director Nagao, he was going back after 1 year to Japan, so I bought something for his wife. I said, look, you must share it from my side with your wife. He says, but Siddiqui-san, I will not be able to meet my wife and my children. I said, are you crazy? After 1 year, you are going back to Japan, working here for 5 years. You are not going to see your family. He says, no, because the policy doesn't allow. My family is north of Japan. I'll be only going next to Tokyo. Hamamatsu come back to India here. Very cool people. And in our case, you can see the moment we get off the plane, हाँ उतर गए निकल रहे हैं बाहर जा रहे हैं होटल पहुंच गए खाना खा लिया पानी पी लिया नहीं something like that. All the time we are in touch with the families back. And I tell you one very simple way how we have got into that kind of mindset, a story. A very rich Japanese lawyer in Japan somewhere, one evening he decided, let me go and enjoy a drive. So he took out his limousine and chauffeur was driving, this guy was seeing the scenario outside, enjoying. Suddenly he saw two Japanese, side of the road eating grass. So he got curious, he said, just stop. He went and asked them, what are you doing? They said, last 1 month, no job. Last 15 days, no money. Last 1 week, no food. So we are eating grass to satisfy our tummy. So that this lawyer said, okay, come in my car today evening, I will feed you. So they said, sir, under the tree, our wife, yeah, no problem, big car, you can get your wife also. This evening, invitation from my side, I'll feed you. So obviously in the car, those poor Japanese were saying, sir, you are like God. So this lawyer said, no, let us not get into those kinds of formalities. No, sir, you are actually God for us. So he said, let us not get into those things. The grass at my farmhouse is 1 meter tall. Very, very different than the way we think. हम लोग होते गाड़ी में तो हम लोग भी रोने लगते हैं, अरे यार कितने परेशानी में आ गए लोग, इनकी सेवा करते हैं. When we look at the workplace, this brings a huge difference into looking at work, looking at issues, not getting into emotional bump, not looking into people's kind of criticism or downsizing and all that kind of concept. To a great extent, this link also is working for the business, but beautifully it is also working for the people. In our company, Suzuki head office, we never ever discuss anything with respect to downsizing. But being business practical, you can certainly look at a strategy which will be very tough to execute 5 years from now. 2025, we are looking at 2.5 million cars to be sold, 25 lakhs. 2030, we are going to touch 5 million, for which we will be needing another 25,000 people, 10 more plants. That's the kind of long-term, cool kind of business strategy, but very sound work culture, great respect for people is where the success is. So anyway, I think to a great extent, please.
One very important point you mentioned, sir, selectively delinking the past.
Deleting the past.
Deleting the past.
Delete.
Very, very important point, but as we grow further in the organization and at a particular time, it becomes very, very difficult.
Yes.
So how HR can play a role in this? Whether HR can support or can act in this?
Yeah, perhaps to a great extent when we look at Maruti, when I entered Maruti 2003, Maruti was a government sector, public sector company, 21 years in existence. And the first assignment, obviously, the main reason for me to come into Maruti through the board was, you change this company just like you have worked in private sector companies, convert this company into a private sector company. So when I joined, company was a private sector company, but the mindset, thinking, processes, policies, rules, every damn thing was a public sector government company kind of. Big shock for me. To a great extent, involving people, creating a mutual purpose for them. One simple thing which was developed at that point of time, I asked whether 2010 you will remain number one. They said, yes, euphoria was, we will remain number one. How? What is the guarantee? And that spurred the change. It took 5 years. So one is transformational leadership, which can bring this kind of shift. One is a mutual shared goal, which can be motivating for people to change. But